Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope you have had a terrific week. Of course, the week has really been dominated by the post August 17th NAR settlement implementation date. We've had a ton of news this week about the rollout, how things are coming along, and I want to touch on it again. And I know we're all getting a little tired of listening about the NAR settlement, but I want to share an interview I listened to yesterday. Before I do that, though, on this Friday, picture of the day, it is a BR. It is a BR, and BR in my house stands for Before Ron. Belinda got that painting overseas well before she met me, and she just adores that painting. We have a couple of paintings by that artist, and I'm told it's a semi-famous artist, but there you go. It has a different kind of feel than the rest of the art in our house, but that's today's selection. And let's see what will be there tomorrow. Now, speaking of today, I was originally going to talk about Scriptapalooza, and I'm not quite ready to do so. So I'll either cover Scriptapalooza tomorrow or Monday. Now, I've almost got all my notes done. I've listened to it a couple of times. I've printed out the transcripts, which are a crazy 60 pages. And I really am going to just shrink that down to 2 or 3 or 4 of the best nuggets, the things that I really liked. And so I'll probably get up to that tomorrow, and we'll see. Tomorrow on Monday. But today, I'm going to talk about this Inman article, which was an interview with Wendy Gilch and Doug Miller. The name of the article, Consumer Groups Stop Trying to Force Sellers to Pay Brokers. And Doug is actually at the genesis of the Morrell lawsuit. He's an attorney as well as, I think, a real estate agent, but he's the genesis of the original Morrell lawsuit. And he talks about his role in there, or at least the interviewer talks about the role in there. And the thing that caught my eye on this article and this interview, and the reason why I thought I'd bring it up, and by the way, if I look at my inbox of articles, I mean, it's populated with articles about the NAR settlement. I mean, from Inman, you had Homie sues NAR and others alleged boycott and conspiracy. You had Real Affinity, which I talked about yesterday, the calm before the storm, preparing for the NAR settlement's impact with dual licensing. Then you have this article, you have another article, agents are prepping sellers for greater variety of offers from Housing Wire. Yet another one, of course, the double-edged sword of dual licensing, which I talked about yesterday. Another article from Inman, business as usual, hiccups, but few calamities as NAR rolls out. A Housing Wire article, no horror stories from agents on the first weekend of NAR. 2 Wall Street Journal stories, cutting fees, going alone, new rules are changing how we buy and sell houses. An Inman article, home buyers see NAR settlement was a big win. My point is, in the last 5 days, I probably have read, and I know you have too, I've read at least 40 or 50 articles on this NAR settlement and the aftermath, and I've saved a dozen. But this one really got my attention, and you know why this got my attention? Is that it surprises me, although it shouldn't, how much confusion there is about the basis of these lawsuits and what the settlement was. And so, and what surprises me, how even large entities are not understanding what's happened and what the spirit of the agreement is and how to follow the spirit of the agreement. So I thought I would just kind of touch on a high level, really easy to understand what the settlement's all about, like easy to understand, and what the jeopardy is and what we all have to avoid going forward. Simple as that. So really, in all the lawsuits, I think they boil down to 2 indefensible problems. And one is antitrust, and the other is steering. So those are the 2 things that we have to solve: antitrust and steering. Really simple. Now, antitrust is probably the easiest thing to solve. And I'm going to speak in layman's terms. I'm, of course, not an attorney. I don't even pretend to be, and I might only have minimum comprehension of things. But in simple terms, what happens is what NAR settlement, what they accepted is that they had acted in collusion to harm consumers. I mean, collusion just means is that more than one competitor got together and made processes or policy that harm the consumer. Now, in the way of real estate, that would be your NMLS and your local boards, because your local boards are just a consortium of a bunch of competitors, right? So when the local boards, they come up with or the associations like CAR is just an association of a bunch of competing real estate companies that agree to policy, that agree to ethics, that agree to legal forms, right? So they collude just means work together. And in this case, what these lawsuits says, they work together to harm the consumer, right? That in working together, they bolstered artificially high commissions, which harm the consumers, that their forms and their policies harm the consumer. And so the settlement that NAR came to, and the global settlement, was we will stop colluding to harm the consumer. That's the settlement, right? Now, the easy way to avoid this, and just to give you some inside baseball, is not to collude. And so an example of that is, and you're seeing this, and this might make sense now, the reason why EXP and other large companies are coming out with their own forms instead of using their state forms or the forms provided by the board, is because there's no argument of collusion if I create it myself, right? Because the settlement doesn't say the forms are illegal. The settlement said you colluded to harm the consumer. Well, if I'm a single entity, I can't consume. I can't partner with somebody else, right? And so therefore, I don't have antitrust. I could put a whole bunch of illegal activity in my form, but it won't be antitrust. And so companies like EXP and others to follow are coming out with their own forms so that it completely takes the risk of antitrust off the table. Makes sense. So really simple. That's the first thing. The second thing is, which we're having a very hard time figuring out, is that, look, but how we set up the real estate transaction process, right, incentivize agents to steer clients towards the agent's best interest, not the client's best interest. So we violated fiduciary responsibilities and rules, and we were self-serving. Now, we maybe have done it consciously or subconsciously, but that's what the steering is. And so when you have a cooperative commission, where if one person says, look, if your buyer comes and buys this house, we're going to pay you 3% commission, right? And the house next door, equal value, equal quality, says, hey, if your buyer buys this house, we're going to pay you a 1% commission. And what the statistics showed is the house with a 3% commission would get like 99 people visiting it, and the house with 1% commission would get like one person visiting it. And in recorded testimony, agents repeatedly said, I'm going to show people the house where I get the highest commission. All right, that's steering. And so what NAR agreed to was that, hey, we will not list cooperative commissions inside the MLS, because that is de facto going to drive steering. And so we're just going to take it out of the MLS. So therefore, NAR, the different associations, are no longer liable for that behavior, right? And so it's really simple. And what's interesting is Kevin Sears, the president of NAR, and a group of folks from NAR, including, by the way, Gary Costa, went and met with the DOJ. This never happens. It's usually attorneys meeting attorneys, not the head of DOJ meeting with the head of the group that they're trying to, enforce sanctions on. They got together, and I can tell you the part that I got away from reports of that meeting, is Kevin Sears left that meeting saying, look, the DOJ is serious. They are going to police these steering issues. And so Kevin then, like 2 days later, issued a very stern press release saying, look, do not circumvent the settlement. If you circumvent the anti-steering portions of this settlement, you will be putting yourself exposed to further legal risk. He said that the DOJ and attorneys will come after you. So do not circumvent it. And circumventing it, so the argument is, should we have cooperative commissions, right? And so there's third-party vendors that are trying to create, websites where agents can post what the cooperative commission is. There's all sorts of workaround vehicles. That's not the spirit of the settlement. The DOJ is being really clear. If you continue to steer via cooperative commissions, we will come after you. And what's worse, right? What's worse than the bite of the DOJ, and the DOJ is being very transparent. Now, it's saying, look, we don't want to bring lawsuits against you. We don't want to bring you to court. Just comply. That's all we want you to do. And it's working by evidence by meeting with Kevin and his team. It's evidence the DOJ is trying to solve this through just friendly means, but real estate agent community has to comply, right? So what we can't do then is go, okay, how do we circumvent the rules by creating these cooperative commissions? We can't do that. And so that gets me to this interview right here. Very interesting. And by the way, both Wendy and Doug clearly say, and Doug is one of the genesis behind the first and major lawsuit. He goes, we don't want to do any more lawsuits. That's not what we do. We just want people to, serve their consumer, right? And to do best and to meet their fiduciary responsibilities. He said a couple things that are very interesting in this article, and I'm not going to, it's a lengthy interview. I'm not going to go through it all, but I'm just going to mention a couple things that caught my attention. First, he says, look, you have to quit using these three misleading talking points. Quit using them. I'll give them to you. By the way, I attempted to put a link to this Inman article in my notes here, so hopefully you can get it. If you want it, if you can't get it and you want a copy, just ping me. I'll shoot it to you. But here are the three things that we have to, these three talking points we have to ban. One, sellers must offer money to buyers' brokers off the MLS, or buyer agents won't show their houses, right? And I'm gonna give you an example of this. So, hey, sellers still need to clearly figure out how to communicate what the cooperative commission is, or else no one will buy their house. Like, that's not a good talking point. Stop it. Number two, buyer agents won't show houses to buyers unless there's an offer of compensation from the listing broker, because they're not going to show houses unless they get paid. This is still very much out there, right? And then three, they created a checkbox to continue steering, but blame it on a fiduciary, being a fiduciary to the buyer. Here's what that says. The buyer's agent goes, hey, buyer, you're going to have to pay my commission, man. If the seller doesn't pay my commission, you're going to have to pay me that $20,000, $30,000. Now, the way we get around that is if you only want me to show houses where the seller is going to pay my commission, and then they check a box. So they check the box. So they created the environment of the steering, and they think that they can avoid that by this box check. So those are the things. Now, here's the thing. Here's the most interesting, and this is what repeatedly comes up in this interview. It doesn't matter whether the DOJ is going to enforce this, because we've now released the entire legal community, all these lawyers, right? We've set them, we've notified them, hey, look, the real estate community is doing all these bad things, which you can now do class action lawsuits. And since we've lost 1 million of them, we're only going to lose more of them. Come on down, Mr. 25-cent lawyer, bring whatever lawsuit you want, right? And so the lawyers become a de facto police department over these activities, because any attorney can file a suit. Any of them can. And so now it becomes not that what is the government's bar, what bar will we have to face in court, and what's the cost of going to court? And so then do we just need to just be holier than thou and not put ourselves at risk? So interesting. So going on this article, Wendy talks about an example, because they're kind of a lightning rod. All these consumers and agents come to them with their problems. And she talks about she goes, this is still happening. She goes, a small broker was helping agent from a small brokerage was helping a buyer buy a house. They want to put an offer on the house from a listing that was listed by a large broker, and the large brokerage did not have list cooperative commissions, and so the agent called the listing agent, the buyer's agent, by the listing agent, goes, hey, we need to know. What's the seller willing, to give? What's the cooperative commission that they're willing to do? And the listing agent said, we can't tell you. That's none of your business. Just put in your best offer, and we'll consider all offers. So then this agent, the buyer's agent, got indignant and said, hey, by law, you have to tell me what you're willing to pay me. And the listing agent said, nope, no, I don't. And so the buyer's agent is just mad it's being frustrated and gets her broker involved, and the broker talks to the listing agent, and the broker says the exact same thing. Look, you got to tell us, it's by law, you got to tell us, blah, blah, blah. And the listing agent said, nope, no, I don't. Just put in your best offer. Like, how hard is that? Put in your best offer, right? And so the buyer's agent, still irate, calls the local board, the state association, he calls the state association, and the state association says, hey, Don't worry, nothing has changed. The listing agent should tell you, just you got to have it off MLS, just in a phone call. The listing agent should tell you. And so the buyer's agent, the broker, and the state association all gave this poor real estate agent horrible advice and wrong advice. Where the best advice is put in your best offer. Put in your best offer. The best advice is, hey, negotiate your fee with your buyer, and then you and your buyer put in the best offer, and then professional buyer's agent negotiate the deal for your client. That's the answer, right? That is the very best answer. So that gets into what's interesting in this interview. I forget who the person was interviewing him, but in the interview, the person asked Wendy, she's both of them, she asked them, hey, so who's doing this right and who's doing this wrong? Like, what companies are reading the tea leaves right and supporting the settlement, and who are trying to circumvent it, right? And it was interesting because, well, of course, EXP, because EXP has created their own forms. They're very rigid forms. And then, of course, they also are not allowing any cooperative commission. None. So they are clearly going, hey, we're going to, the DOJ scared us. And by the way, it's the right thing to do. And so then they go, well, who's not following the letter of the law? Who's trying to circumvent it? And they called out Compass. And what they said specifically is Compass has no interest in decoupling anything, right? And then what they provided is a Compass talking sheet. It's right here, Compass talking sheet, which essentially gives 10 points on how to circumvent the settlement, right? It's the craziest thing. Compass is a great company. Why would you take such risk? Why would you do that? Why would you publish, hey, here's a cheat sheet on how to circumvent the settlement, right? When the person writing this article called Compass and said, hey, why would you provide your agency scripts, right? And Compass gave a very weak answer. Well, these aren't really company sanctioned scripts. These are just on a global intranet site that people can access comments on, right? And I mean, on these talking points are like, hey, Mr. Seller, if you don't offer cooperative commissions, you probably won't sell your house. Essentially. And and it goes, although it's your choice, if you want to sell your house, you're going to have to pay cooperative commissions. And it's 10 points just circumventing the law. It doesn't make any sense. So, found that kind of interesting. Moving on, Doug talked about some of the questions he's had, and this is really, really interesting. If the listing agent negotiates a cooperative commission, so they sign an agreement with the seller that the seller is going to pay 5.5% commission, with the intent of half of it going to the buyer's agent, right? But the buyer's agent puts in their best and their best offer, and they ask for a 3% concession versus a cooperative commission. The listing agent, if the seller accepts that offer, the listing agent gets the entire commission, all 5.5%. And so there's a couple examples in this interview where they talk about, hey, if you don't conform to the way I'm gonna set this up, then you risk me getting the entire commission. And of the two agents that this has come up with in the last week, both said that they were not going to reduce their if the buyer requested a concession instead of cooperative commission, they would not rebate their commission back to the seller. Is that crazy? That is really, really crazy. So this is an interesting article. There's a ton of stuff out there. I really just wanted to kind of help simplify what NAR agreed to, what the DOJ is paying attention to, and remember, it's antitrust, meaning we can't collude to harm the consumer. So that's really simple. That's why we've changed all the forms. That's why companies are making their own forms, right? We can't collude to harm the consumer. And then second, we cannot steer consumers, right, to in our favor and ignore theirs. We have to serve the consumer first. Now, what's interesting in this article, the thing that ended this article, which just kind of scared me a little bit. Miller went through all the legal jeopardy that real estate companies might have. He said, look, we've opened Pandora's box. Like forever, NAR was impenetrable. You couldn't win a lawsuit against them. They just were a massive force, but now they've been crippled, and attorneys think they can win, 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 win. And so he says, if I was a real estate company, I would go back and audit everything. It's like all those things in the gray area, all those things that that have become normal practice that you think are codified are all at risk, right? Especially around fiduciary. You have a fiduciary responsibility. Well, attorneys understand fiduciary responsibilities, and they clearly don't think that we meet the standard of fiduciary, and they're going to come after real estate companies. And so clean up your fiduciary practices, first thing. And another thing, like what he really called out is, as an example of that is these, all these affinity relationship agreements where we're charging, for access to our customer. He goes, those, whether a government entity, polices that or not, that attorneys are going to be all over that right now. They are going to eat that up with a spoon, and so you're going to see future lawsuits. And so what he says, and I think is a good suggestion, audit everything. Get into the black. Don't be in the gray area. Don't be in the red area. Get into the black. So I went a little long. Hopefully this was insightful. Hopefully it made things really easy to understand. This really comes down to anti-steering or antitrust and steering. Let's help our agents find a way. Let's be educated. Let's provide them stuff, because they're super confused. And the reason why is nobody's giving them direction. And so they're going onto these online chat boards where nobody knows what they're talking about. They're getting misinformation, and they're finding the information they want versus the truth. And it's just causing, it's that messy middle that I talked about the other day. Messy middle. That's where we're post-NAR settlement, but not yet to the space where we understand it, are in rhythm and executing the intent of the agreement. I hope you have a great Friday. Hopefully this is the start to a good weekend, and hopefully it's a productive weekend. People are out there looking at houses. Folks are wanting to refi. It's a great time to be in the business. I will talk to you tomorrow. Thanks so much. Bye.